Welcome to Shine on Oklahoma Music, and we're privileged to have with us today Grammy Award winner Wayne Coyne of
All
the
right,
Flaming Lips.
all
So I
right.
appreciate you coming, Wayne. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
doing
thank
this.
you. Yeah, I didn't notice you have boots on.
I mean, we play the role here in Oklahoma.
Wow.
Well, thanks. You are flashing some green boots here.
I do. Mine are made by the guy Fluvog. You know, he's a famous shoemaker in Soho, New York, and so when my wife and I were there, we went in to buy her some shoes. But once you see those, you can't resist.
You won a Grammy here just recently.
Right. I mean, we are like the luckiest group ever. I mean, I think, it's probably a little bit like if someone told you you have to walk a mile today, and then the next day they said, no, you have to walk another mile today. You'd end up walking like 100 miles, and you'd never know you could, but you're only just doing it a mile at a time. I think that would definitely apply to us. When we started, we wouldn't have even wanted to have lasted 40 years. We wouldn't have wanted to lasted 10 years. We'd have thought, well, what are we going to do? It was such an exciting, inspiring moment that you don't really think that, there is 10 years from now or 20 years from now. But yeah, I know. Once we got to be like 5 or 6 years into it, we started to think, I guess we should figure out what we're doing because we've kind of been doing it for a while. And then when 10 years hit, I kind of remember being slightly embarrassed, like it's like, I guess this is what we're going to do. But little by little, it would dawn on us like, what a crazy, unique, lucky position to really, I mean, we did not come from the music business or even a musical family or any of that. We were inspired by punk rock from the late 70s and just sheer willpower to be like, we would be in a band and write our own songs and try to make a record or something. And that was enough. But yeah, I think we were just very lucky from the very beginning. I think in the very beginning, if people are too hostile against your things that you're creating or whatever, that can really bring you down. And we were just very lucky that when we'd leave Oklahoma, people would always remark about that.
Yeah.
Like that. We would see a little write-up. It wouldn't be very big, but we'd always say, you got to see the Flaming Lips because you won't believe it. They're from Oklahoma. And I think what they meant is this sound that we make, you wouldn't readily think of it being from Oklahoma, unlike what Vince Gill was doing or something in Mountain Smoke or Bluegrass or something. And, in a sense, that would kind of always surprise us because, Oklahoma City, even back when we started in the 80s, it was just a very normal city. Mm-hmm. It wasn't necessarily one way or the other. And though I was probably more the people I hung out with, I didn't see it as being, it's country music and it's a slaughterhouse and it's rodeo and all those things that maybe people in the world would think of Oklahoma City as. But once I got out there in the world, yeah, I think there's a very narrow, not badly cliched, but cliched version of Oklahoma from the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. And then just kind of, little by little things have happened. People still think that Timothy McVeigh, was from around here or whatever, these big world events, and people would say, literally, it would be in Ireland or Italy or somewhere, and they'd say, you're the only person I've ever met from Oklahoma. Like,
that's why it was important to have you as part of this series because you do represent, everybody stereotypically thinks of us as country, but in fact we've got jazz and rock and roll and rockabilly.
Oh yeah, everything. Yeah.
And
yeah.
you got to.
And that's what I mean. I would have never thought of that. I mean, I just think, okay. I mean, it's all, it's just a very normal city with all kinds of stuff. But yeah, exactly.
And you were celebrated so much for that here as being an ambassador from Oklahoma. You got to be the rock song of Oklahoma.
We did
against some pretty tough competition too. too.
Well, I mean, luckily, the governor at the time, and even Joe Dorman, the guy that put the sort of bill together. I mean, those things, it must be complicated. I remember talking to him about it. I think we had a lot of momentum at the time, and especially our song "Do You Realize," which utterly surprised us, and it's such a it's such an overwhelming thing to think this silly song. I mean, it's not silly to people, but as a songwriter and stuff, you're just kind of doing, whatever's coming into your imagination or whatever. To think that this song could now start to represent this bigger thing, it was kind of it's kind of intimidating. Yeah.
Well, tell us about that, because let's hear the story about our state's rock song.
Well, I think it was probably radical because. I think there was a state rock song, there's a state country song. I think there was, there was a couple of categories there, and this song, "Do You Realize?" It's kind of an existential. It's kind of sad, and kind of it hints at a way of seeing the world, and the line that I think even the governor at the time, Brad Henry. That he was drawn to so much is the line that says, everyone you know someday will die. Do you realize everyone you know someday will die? And, I would have thought of this lyric only in a second, and then I remember playing it for Stephen, the other songwriter in the group, and we kind of get together and write, we write our songs together. I remember singing that for him and thinking if he didn't like it, we just change it. We'd go somewhere else or whatever, and I remember him immediately saying, "Oh, that's gonna work. That's a good Wayneism. Like only you would sing something like that in such an optimistic way, So I think that's kind of the promise that I've made to the gods of music, is they. Because I'm really not a musician at all, even though some of the guys in the group are master musicians. I'm not really a musician. That's why I'm always a little intimidated by being put in the categories of some of the other musicians that you'll probably talk to. Because, I really am just a weirdo doing what I like, and I really love music. But I think someone went before the gods of music and said, you've got to let Wayne into the group, the club here. And I think they said, Wayne, yeah, we'll only let you in on one condition, that you always follow your heart. And if you ever try to be a fake, or you ever try to do this for money or for power or any of that sort of stuff, we'll destroy you, So I think that's my promise, is that, I'll sing from my heart, and that'll just be what my path is. And if people like it, well, that's going to be good for me. And if they don't, well, I can always say, look, I'm doing what you said.
Exactly. So you came up with this song, and what year would you have written that?
Well, probably probably 2000, and maybe 2001. So a long time ago now, and so it's.
But not too long before the state song, so that was relatively new.
Well,
did you already think of it in terms of it being a classic in that short time frame?
Well, we didn't in the beginning, but as people started to hear it, it would become one of these songs that people would play at like their weddings, and people would start to play it at funerals, and you'd see it. Now you see it a lot on these reels, because they're kind of put together on your iPhone or something, where your kids are born or having an anniversary or something. And if you would have, said this song is going to be like that, when we were sort of making it, Stephen and Dave Fridman and I, we would have just been, oh no, no, it's like it's not. But in time, I do completely understand that, and I do see how music can really affect people. I mean, if it touches your heart, and especially in times. Where there's some profound event is happening. Sometimes you want this music to kind of, express that or whatever. And so now we see it differently. It's wonderful to have such a powerful, such a meaningful song, and then in the very beginning of going out there in front of people and playing it, like we know this is a big, meaningful song. It kind of carries a little bit of responsibility with it. But now that we've been playing it for a long, long time, I think we figured out a good way to inhabit the song and it being, one of the songs we're going to play. There are 20 songs we're going to play on a given night, just like we did on Sunday night. But it still be a big, epic, powerful moment. That's the funny thing about, concerts. It's kind of like one great moment after another. It's like, ta-da! And then you kind of regroup, and then here we go again, But it's wonderful.
Well, this Grammy that you just won here recently, that's for SpongeBob, right? Is the soundtrack part?
I think so. So there's a lot of things about it, that's not really up to you. It's not really in your control, and especially the Grammys, they get voted on. It's never just about popularity. It's not just about sales and stuff like that. But people in the industry kind of have to like you.
Yeah.
And so again, I think we've been lucky in that way.
I mean, nominated, I think 6 times, if I recall right, and won 3.
I can't quite remember. I mean,
That's impressive.
The very first time we won, we went to the show itself. I think it was in Los Angeles. Yeah. But there's a lot of awards that are given that aren't part of the television show. I think it was the year. Slash from Guns N' Roses. Slash's Snake Pit was also up for the Grammy that we were going to get, and so was Joe Satriani. I don't know if anybody knows that name, but we did at the time. And we went to the ceremony really not expecting to win at all. Just sort of being open to some of these things that happen in the music industry that are just kind of absurd, especially to us, these weirdos from Oklahoma. And when we were invited to the Grammys, we're like, really? You sure you got the right people here, And I can tell you for sure, people think, oh, you must know that you're going to win. You don't. I mean, we didn't. Maybe Kanye West or somebody does, but we had no idea that we were going to win. We knew that we were up for it. But we didn't know we were going to win. And we were sitting there, and it's not a jam-packed auditorium because it's earlier in the day, and they're getting ready for the bigger telecast that night because they have like 300 of these Grammys that they have to give to somebody, But Slash is there with his girlfriend and I think his son at the time, and he looks like he's ready to win. He's like, let's get this over with. We'll go out and celebrate later on. And we see Slash, and we're kind of like, we don't know him, but we're like, well, that's Slash, and not thinking at all like we're going to win. And they go to announce the category, and the song that we won for has a long title. It's called "Approaching Pavanis Mons" by Balloons. It's a long title. It takes a long time to say it, And they started to announce it, and before they could even finish the title, I'd already run up to the podium. Like, that's us. And I still think Slash was still standing there like, what? I didn't win, and it was it's
Had to be
it's an
huge.
absurd moment. Well, I mean, I don't ever think of it as being like, well, if you win a Grammy, that means your music is better than someone who didn't win a Grammy or anything like that. But I think it's one of these things that kind of I remember back then. You still went to the bank. I mean, nowadays you don't go to the bank. It's all done online. But I remember waiting in line at the bank, and the guy behind me was like, "Hey, you won a Grammy," and it would be one of these things that I wouldn't quite have it in my mind. Like, oh yeah, like that's a thing, and yeah, it is. It's and those types of markers. For achievements and stuff. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful, but I never quite think about it. It's like, because it's all that's kind of out of your control. It's not like when the Thunder wins. They're winning because they beat the other team. And in music, in art, I never think that we're beating somebody else. I never think that we're in competition with somebody else. Like I said, I've made a promise to the gods of music to speak from my heart, and whatever that gets me, I'll take it.
So you get to work through all these decades, and you come up to the pandemic. And I bring this up because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
made national news because of your innovative way to still be able to connect with audiences. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we did. Well, for people that haven't seen us that often, you may have seen a picture of me in this thing. I call it the space bubble. The very first time that we did it was at the Coachella Festival, 2004. So a long time ago now. I'd gotten this big inflatable plastic bubble, and I would get in the bubble. I originally got it because we were making this movie Christmas on Mars, and I wanted this. It was going to be my spaceship. Okay, so we knew we were going to use a lot of computer animation and stuff like that, and I was going to get in this bubble, but I couldn't really find one. This is be in the year 2000 or 2001 or something, But I kept looking, and right before we went to this big festival, the Coachella Festival, this space bubble arrived, and I just thought, I'm just going to get in it right as the show starts, and I'm going to jump out on top of the crowd. I'm going to roll around on the crowd. Back then, you couldn't sing in it because back then the microphones and the PA system wasn't the way it is now. But I just got in it and sort of, would jump around. Didn't really know what was going to happen because a lot of times these big festivals, they don't let you do stuff like that. They would be like, no, we're not gonna risk any of that stuff happening. There's always a lot of chaos and a lot of, worried promoters around. So I didn't really tell anybody, and before anybody could stop me or anything, I was just in it and I was over top of the crowd. It all went fairly well. It's very chaotic being in there and being the first time I did it. I mean, my heart was racing and I didn't know if I could get back to the stage or anything. It's quite a ways out there. And I did make it back. I got out and I sang the rest of the set. And, you still don't know how was this, But the very next morning, we were waking up at the festival and we were getting ready to, get in our, cars and then get in our buses or whatever and leave the festival. And the front of the newspaper had a picture of me in the space bubble. And this was like the picture from the festival, of all these big bands. The Cure had played and Radiohead had played, lots of great, great groups. We were the ones on the front page in this space bubble. And so I think from that, initial thing, people just looked at it as like, oh, this is just a great, great thing, as opposed to being like an embarrassing gimmick or something, which it is. It is that at the same time. But it was, again, I wanted to do it, and I wouldn't really know why. This is what I mean. I promised the gods I'm going to follow my imagination and my creative desires or whatever, and that will be what makes the Flaming Lips. And so I started to do that in 2004, and I would do it virtually every night. I probably wouldn't do it every night, because some nights there probably would be a limit that of what we could do or whatever. And it just got to where it would be something that, you're playing a lot of songs, but it would be a moment that you'd see people taking a picture of a lot. And back then the camera phones, they're not as good as they are these days, but you still see quite a few pictures. And then as camera phones got better and better, we played a show on Sunday night, and if you look online, the next couple of days after that, you'll see 500 pictures of me in a space bubble, and other stuff now, So it was something that we were, something that we knew of, and we knew how that worked, and we knew how to get them manufactured, and we knew how long you could be in these space bubbles. So when the pandemic hit, this is going back to March of 2020, long time ago now, I made this little cartoon of say the year 2019, I would be in a space bubble and everybody else would just, it would just be a normal show where I'm the only one in the space bubble. And then, fast forward to 2020, I'm in the space bubble, but everybody in the band is and everybody in the audience is as well. Now, this is really just a little commentary. It wasn't meant to be anything that was telling the future or anything, because we didn't really know. I mean, I think I'm speaking for everybody. I think when the pandemic started, we thought, well, maybe this is a month, maybe this is 6 weeks, and you're kind of, you're praying that people aren't dying in the streets, but you kind of think, well, this, the adults will show up and this will be over with. But then when it didn't end, right away, we started to get just some requests. I mean, we got the request from the Stephen Colbert Show to be like, do you guys, we know that you guys can do your own productions. This is what started to be the at-home, appearances where you're on the Stephen Colbert Show, but you're really just doing it from here. And the talent, organizer at the time, he had seen this cartoon that I made. And he was kind of hinting like, well, do you think you could do that? And I was like, I don't really know if I could, but let's try. So we had to, at the time, we had to find a lot of space bubbles. Now,
where does one go about finding space bubbles?
Well, the Stephen Colbert Show had two of them.
Really?
Because we had done a Stephen Colbert Show, 2012, I think it was, where he was in a space bubble and I was in a space bubble. We both went out on the crowd. And I think they didn't know that I carried them. And they had a couple there just to make sure that Wayne had one and Stephen had one. And I think they didn't realize how fragile they were, so they wanted to make sure if one had a hole in it or something. So they had two. And I probably had 8 or 9, just old ones and, ones that had duct tape on them or whatever. And then we scoured the internet. You end up going to eBay and wherever you can, We ended up getting, probably 25 of them or something for this show that we did for the Stephen Colbert Show. And, it was still early in the pandemic. And so everything that we did was, everybody's completely masked up and people are in their cars until the very second we're shooting. And then they would come in and get in the space bubble. And as soon as we'd finish the song, one by one, everybody would go back out. And it was, pretty scary times. Only because, we're doing this thing and it's entertaining and it's supposed to be fun and all that. But you don't want to think 2 or 3 weeks later that all those people now have come down with the coronavirus, especially in the beginning where there was no vaccinations. Right. There were hardly any masks that people could buy. So that was in our minds of how risky it is, but also how careful we should be. So it plays on the Colbert Show probably about a month after we've done the taping, because they're getting all their tapings together and they're going to figure out when they're going to air it. Mm-hmm. And then once it airs, people rightly, not that it was right, but they have the right to think that, look at the Flaming Lips are already doing these crazy concerts in these space bubbles. Everybody in the band is in a space bubble and everybody in the audience is in a space bubble. Now we knew that it was just one song and it was all very much controlled, and then you get in there and we perform the song for TV and then we get out, So the time you're in the space bubble is only about 15 minutes and everybody's back out, But everybody started to think, well, Wayne, why don't you do more of these space bubble concerts so people could go to concerts? And I started to think, well, I don't know, maybe we could. I mean, we did all this other preliminary work, and so we just started to look into it more and more. But again, I think what I would always say was, well, the pandemic's going to be over in another couple of months, and then we'll all be back to doing concerts. Well, when that wasn't becoming more and more true, we did have a bunch of space bubbles manufactured. Now, they were coming from China. So in the beginning of the pandemic, that's exactly where the coronavirus was coming from too. So you couldn't really get anything from China, not in the normal way that you could do it, So everything was about 100 times harder and more complicated than it would have been without the coronavirus. So, all these things, but as we know now, we did have a lot of time. We didn't have any idea that it would be such a long thing. So we started to put on these, we called it the world's first space bubble concerts. Of course it was. Who else would do it, We did it downtown in Bricktown at the Criterion. The Criterion is one of these great venues. A lot of these venues are modeled after like what the Criterion is now in Oklahoma City. Big venue. Lots of space in there, and so we had a lot of room to work without having to worry too much about it being too close to people. Everybody in masks and everybody doing all their hand sanitizing and all that, and they allowed us to be in there for, most of that first year. I mean, there would be times when our equipment wouldn't be on the stage, but really we were set up in there, working. That for that entire first year, we started to think, would an audience want to do this. And so we put the very first show on sale. And part of you is still thinking, if this goes badly, this is we only sold 100 of these space bubbles. It takes up the entire criterion, but it's only 100 space bubbles. But part of you is thinking, again, this could be one of these events where everybody that's there, has coronavirus 2 weeks later. All this is always in your mind.
Sure.
So we put the tickets on sale, and you don't really know. Is anybody really going to do it? I think that people always talk about things, but do they really do it? And then those tickets sold out in about 20 seconds, and we thought something has gone wrong with the ticket system or something. The whole thing went down, But then, 5 or 10 minutes later, we realized, I think they've all sold out that fast, So we kept adding shows, thinking, well, as long as people want to come to the shows, we'll see if we can do it. And we knew what to do, and we knew how to do it. Little by little, all these things began to be more common. When we did it the very first time, we would not have thought about the 6 feet apart and all this sort of stuff. But as we went, that became more common. So, the audience would show up, and of course, they would already know they're going to wait outside in their cars. Now everybody does that. We'll probably do that even when the pandemic has been over for a long time. But, you'd wait in your car, and then you'd wait outside in a line. You'd have to have masks on, and we'd have to take everybody into the venue, 10 people at a time, get them in their bubbles. Just like so many details that when I think about it now, I get a little, it's intimidating, But at the time,
It was revolutionary.
it was, but we didn't think of it that way. We really just thought of it like this would be a great way for us to do a concert and for our audience to be able to go to a concert. Think about it now, I think, wow, it's insane.
The Trolley Stop Record Shop, which is just down the street from where I think you live, and I was in there one day, and there were people there at the time you were doing these shows from California.
Yeah.
And they were so excited to
Yeah.
be able to find a live show anywhere in the United States that they flew all the way here just to see your show.
Yeah.
And they said if they just were by chance that they got a ticket within seconds of it being sold out.
Exactly, yeah. And so all those things, would play into it being taken absolutely serious. Because, you want people to walk away saying, what a great concert and what a great feeling it was to be at a concert, hearing music and being around, people that are excited and all that. But you don't want to hear, and then they all died of coronavirus, a month later, So it's a big, big responsibility. So I think the fantastic spectacle and the revolutionary aspect of it and all that never occurred to us till way afterwards, because we're just so concerned about all these details and making sure all these people are safe. And once we did that, you kind of are meant to be like, wow, what a insane thing to do. So yeah, and even you saying it now, I'm like, oh, you're right, we did do that. It's cool.
Well, in CBS, like early morning show, which is a big deal.
Yeah,
they did a huge feature on it.
They did,
So
yes. They were wonderful.
Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
The cover.
Yeah.
You're with the band for 40 years, and you're still striking on the cover of Rolling Stone. That is no little bitty accomplishment there.
Right. Again, all those sorts of things, they're out of your control, and you don't know if people are going to, talk about it as a good thing either. Sometimes you're in the news, and it's because it's because they don't
I
like
think it's
it.
your relevance, though, and so that's a tribute to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, for sure.
And you got to work with a lot of the people that you were listening to the music as a kid, and you eventually get to work with some of your heroes. So tell us about some that you got to work with.
We've met so many people along the way.
Now, did you do a show with Guns N' Roses or Blondie or?
Well, we did a show, and Neil Young. He doesn't do it anymore, but he used to put on this yearly benefit for his two of his sons have, I think it's a cerebral palsy or something like that. I'm not positive what it is, but he would do this benefit every year to raise money and awareness for this school that he was part of. And the year that we played, Guns N' Roses was, I guess they were the last band on that night. These things can be so hectic that you're not quite sure, And Eddie Vedder was there, and all kinds of people are there. And Neil Young's there. I remember sitting in Neil Young's car, listening to he has a kind of his own sort of tailored sound system that he wants everybody to come to these. When you go to these things, he wants you to listen to it. And the way we listened to it was in his crazy car. And he really wanted us to remark about how great it sounded. So we're in Neil Young's car listening to a Led Zeppelin at like maximum volume. And it would have been great no matter what was happening, you know?
Exactly.
And I remember him later saying, "What'd you think of the way it sounded?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, he wanted us to, you know, what are you going to say? It was the greatest thing ever." But it wasn't really the way it sounded or anything. It's just another absurd moment to be like, I'm sitting in Neil Young's car with Neil Young, listening to Led Zeppelin track, and yeah, pretty absurd. And then Guns N' Roses plays. Now it's not the Guns N' Roses. See, this is the connection here. So it's not the Guns N' Roses like it is now. Now Guns N' Roses is back together now, but this is a little while back, and Slash wasn't in Guns N' Roses at the time. And I don't know.
He never got over you beating him for the Grammy.
Well, you know, I don't know Axl Rose at all. And he showed up. It was quite late even showing up to the thing. I think he literally showed up, walked in and played. And then Neil Young has everybody come back on stage for a big, I forget the song, but everybody's on stage together singing a song, which I didn't know, but I pretended like I knew it. And I ended up standing next to Axl Rose of all people, and he didn't know the song either. And we both kind of joked about, well, you know, this is kind of what you do at these things. You pretend you know the song, and we all sing along, and no one really knows, and it's funny, but you know, that's just what you do. And then as I was walking off, he said, "You're the guy that took Slash's Grammy."
See?
Yeah. I mean, of all things.
You don't get over a thing like that.
I think they must have been so at each other's throats at the time that I think anything that Axl could see that would be a
dig.
yeah, exactly, you know, which surprised me. I didn't even know what he was talking about at first, but little by little I put it together, you know, how much joy he got from Slash not winning, you know. so that's what I mean by, you know, these things, they really are just kind of absurd, you know. It's all, one side of it is just really ridiculous entertainment, and one side of it is really heartfelt, you know, art, and you kind of just go in between these things all the time. So, and I take all of it as being wonderful. Anytime I run into anybody on the street that has seen us, you know, on TV, seen us on the Stephen Colbert Show, or seen us because we have a Grammy, I think all of it's absolutely wonderful. Or I run into people who wouldn't know about those things at all, and know records that we did, you know, even back in 1986 or whatever. So, right. Yeah, it's a great awareness of how much music touches people. It's amazing.
Tell us about some of the Oklahoman stars that you've gotten to interact with.
Well, I'm trying to remember. You know, a lot of people think that Tom Petty recorded in Tulsa, you know, in 1974, and you know, there's some evidence of that. And even though I've met Tom Petty, we never played with him or anything. But he's not really from Oklahoma. You know, people have this Oklahoma connection. People think that I would have known Leon Russell. I didn't know Leon Russell. He's from Tulsa. I know some of the groups from around here that were up for the same the rock song of the year. I think the All-American Rejects. I think they were up for that. I don't know Garth Brooks. I'd love to meet Garth Brooks. I mean, he's just an interesting, you know, cool guy. Has done cool things out of you know, for the human race in general. You know, just as a cool person. I can't think of that many. I never really think what's Oklahoma and what isn't. You know, to me, music is just you know, it's just planet Earth. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm always surprised when I'm like, oh yeah, they're from here or they're from there.
Hanson.
Yeah, know them quite well. Yeah. They end up doing a lot of things. You know, they're a group like us that's been around since the 90s, but are still really, really active. And so end up, and they put on these great fan club shows in Tulsa. And through the years, even though I'm in the Flaming Lips, I've known quite a few people who like Hanson as well. And so, you know, they'll say, "Hey Wayne, you know, can you see if the Hansons will get us into the show, and I'll text them, and they'll say, yeah, we're all going to the show. So, yeah, but again, I never really think of it as like, oh, they're from Oklahoma. It's just it's a group doing music. I never think of it like that.
What about any of our country stars? You said you haven't met Garth. Any of them you have met?
I'm trying to think. I mean, when we did the Centennial show in 2007, is that when the Centennial was? Toby Keith was there, and I mean Toby, he's a phenomenal, he's around the whole world, and that's the only time we've been around him. I mean, our paths don't cross that often, we got to go to his world more than he's going to come to our world, which is great. But I still run into his son, Stellan, I think his name is. He's such a funny character. Whenever I see him, he's always just laughing. I'm like, oh man, what a great spirit, And I think we met Reba. Is she still considered to be from Oklahoma?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I only know because there's the big painting on the wall down there on is it Robinson Street? Maybe it turns into
E.K. Gaylord.
Yeah, there, exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. And as I go by there, I'm reminded, everybody that's in one of the cars, all the famous people from Oklahoma, and of course we're on the wall, But yeah, and all those things are great, you know. I mean, I think we're mostly grateful to be just part of the whole thing, And I think a lot of that's, even back in the day with Brad Henry and Joe Dorman, sort of including us in all that stuff, and we have the alley named after us down there in Bricktown.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
maybe the most famous alley in Oklahoma.
Well, and now there's a I forget the name of the hotel, giant new hotel and a big Starbucks built right on the thing, and that alley's kind of been transformed a little bit now. And we'll say it's because it's Flaming Lips Alley, but it's mostly probably because of Starbucks is there, But
so what was it like? You get to be a part. You mentioned the Centennial. I mean, what you talk about preservation of history. I mean, that is a moment. And you were a central entertainment act that was a part of that.
Right.
And it wasn't just one event. I think you did maybe multiple things throughout the year.
I can't remember. I mean, there's so many things attached to the Centennial, and we at the same time we were doing like a New Year's Eve show every year down at the building that used to be called the Myriad. I'm not sure what it's called now. Those buildings. Yeah. They change names a lot, but so we're always doing 1,000 things, every year anyway. But those things, they're wonderful, but there's what it is. But when you're in the middle of it, it's nerve-wracking, it's chaotic, and it is beautiful. But you're so, especially shows like that, because it's, you're going to see 20 people come on stage and do a song or two. And they're so organized. You're waiting. You're on your mark until go, and it's also nerve-wracking. You go out there and sing your song. Oh my gosh, you just want to cry. So it's hard to always take in just how epic it is and how important it is and how big it is, because you're just a small part of this little this show that's getting ready to happen. And but. Yeah, I mean, I don't. Again, I try not. I don't think about it that much. I'm reminded of that. It's mostly people that like our music. I never go in anywhere and think, I'm that I'm this recognized entity or anything. I guess I'm always still a little bit surprised. You're just at the grocery store and. I saw you at the hospital. Yeah. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, But to me, that's great. I feel like, if the Flaming Lips music, it's like we're already friends.
Yeah.
And that's always the way I treat it. If someone says, Wayne, I love you. I'm like, well, I love you too. It's like we know each other because of this connection with the music and stuff. So, but I never, I don't know. It's, when I see someone like Barry Switzer, I mean...
There's a star.
You're like, he's the king, and and he, when I think of when people think of Oklahoma, it's like, oh my gosh, But so I don't put myself in a category like a Barry Switzer or even like a Gary England or something. It's like I mean, I do music, so that's it's a different world. I'm not. I don't know. Music is just a sacred realm of like, you get to, you're touching people when sometimes they're at their most vulnerable, sad moments in their life, and that's not the same as football and weather and stuff like that, So I never think of it's like that they know Wayne, it's like they may know our song, which is really, that's what's important. It's not even who does the song, it's that the song touches you. And but I can understand where people, if they love your song, that's the guy that does that song. Yeah.
Well, so like you mentioned your shows downtown. You did a New Year's Eve show with
Yeah.
Yoko Ono.
Oh man. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
talk about iconic.
Well,
There's a big
yeah,
name.
absolutely, yeah. Well,
What was it like? You get to interact with her much?
yeah, quite a bit. I mean, we've known them now for quite a while. I say them because we know her because of her son Sean Lennon, John Lennon's son with Yoko. We were doing, I think there was, I mean, we've known Sean really since the very first time he played here. I mean, we went down to see them in Bricktown. Even, he was just a young guy, long time ago. So we've known him forever. And then we did David Letterman's show. Was doing a Beatles 50-year anniversary show or something, because they're in the Ed Sullivan Theater, and that's
Right.
where the Beatles did their Ed Sullivan appearance, And they were having everybody do a Beatles song, and we were working on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, this great John Lennon song on the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and we asked Sean to do it with us. So, he's John Lennon's son, and we thought, we're doing this John Lennon song. Let's see if we can be on the David Letterman show together. That's the only time he's really ever done any of his father's music. He does his own thing. He's got his own, his own group and does his own music and all that. But he made an exception with this. And so through things like that, we would know him more and more. And then little by little, we would be invited to do stuff where it's Sean and Yoko, and mostly because Sean's there, we have access to Yoko. And then the more musical things that Yoko would do, we would sort of ask to be involved here and there. We've recorded with her, we've done collaborations with her. I tried to even get her on a song with Miley Cyrus, but at the time, I just didn't have enough time. I think Yoko was too worried. Even though we recorded, I think she was too worried about, who is this Miley Cyrus? And if I had just another 6 months, I think she would have said, okay, this will be great, But I understand her being, cautious about it. But yeah, and then I think they reformed her group, Yoko Ono and the Plastic Ono Band, and Sean and I think Klaus Vormann and some of the people that were in the group in the beginning, were coming back to do it. And we asked them to do the two nights of New Year's Eve shows here. And they said yes. I know. And I mean, and again, see, this is, before it happens, you think this is going to be the greatest thing ever. And then after it happens, you think that was the greatest thing ever. But when it's happening, it's chaos. There's a lot of things
right.
that you have to make sure are going right. And, I'm involved in all the stuff, so it's not like I just show up at the end of the day and sing songs on stage or whatever, But yeah, and again, knowing them for so long and being part of their life and even being at their house and all that. I mean, I think about her a lot now because she's I think she's 88, 89 years old, and it's like these are the years. More and more the way news and internet is. You see how many of these people as they get older, it's like we don't have them anymore. So
do you realize?
Well, it's true, and
right
so
there.
luckily I do,
Yeah.
and I think about it all the time. I'm always talk with Sean, always ask him about his mom, and and when we were really young, I mean, my older brothers would drive us to school downtown, and in the 10 minutes it took for us to get from my parents' house to school, they would probably smoke 5 joints, and we would listen to music every day, and they listened to a lot of Beatles, and they always mixed in Yoko and John with Beatles. To them, it was all the same thing, So I grew up really listening to all that. I never thought of Yoko as being an outsider to any of that. I just always thought she was cool and great and unique and
So we met through your manager, Scott Booker.
Yeah, there you go.
Who's a good friend. And you mentioned Flaming Lips Alley.
Yeah.
And of course, it connects down there to the ACMs for UCO.
Yeah.
And he has done so much for music and aspiring people here in Oklahoma without having to go to Chicago. So tell us a little bit about your role with the ACMs.
Well, I mean, I think I'm really just kind of a figurehead. I mean, I'm not involved in any of the big decisions, even though Scott and I would talk about, ideas and stuff like that. But he really is the one that has to do the day-to-day. And so, I mean, it's just amazing.
Tell the viewers about that, just so that they know the 360 of what that
Well, I
organization
think at the very beginning, there's a sister school. We call those things like that now. I think it's in Liverpool. And the idea was this school in Liverpool was where you could go and you could learn about music. You could learn how to play instruments and all that. But you could also learn about the business of music. You could also learn about production of music. You could also learn all these things about having contacts and being connected to all these musicians and all these ways that are working in the industry: songwriting, video making, managing, booking shows, all that. Which, if you think about it, now in Liverpool, maybe that's an easier to come by kind of idea. But to think like in Oklahoma, if you don't know anybody that knows that stuff, where do you go to meet people? And Scott and I would talk about that all the time. Like, this school would be away from, some kid from McAllister, could get together with a kid from, the Panhandle somewhere, and they could get together at this school, and maybe they're going to form a band together where they really would never have any idea the other one existed without that. They get to work on stuff and be with each other and play music and record it and produce it and all that. And that's really come true. 3 or 4 guys on the Flaming Lips crew right now are graduates from the school. And so in that way, it's really hard to believe that it really came into existence and is still going quite well. Yeah, and hopefully getting more influential and more, and the music industry part of it, especially here in Oklahoma, that's a mystery. I mean, even though we're part of the music industry in a sense, I really still have no idea, how any of it really works, But luckily we have some, a guy like Scott who is so smart and so kind and so in love with music. I mean, I think that's everything that we goes forward is because of our love of music. And of course, people want to figure out a way to how do you make that your profession? How do you do that as a job? And how do you get, I don't know, sort of a team around you that helps you do your thing? Because everybody thinks that's what Scott and I did, and I think we did, but I didn't think we knew that we were doing it. And I think that's kind of the aftermath of just doing it yourself, but now it turning into doing it. The school is our way of saying, here's a way you can do it yourself, So I think there's going to be more and more of these around the country, little by little, all the time, because I mean that really is such a strange world to want to get into. If you don't know any managers, you don't know any booking agents, you don't know any record companies, you don't know. What do you do? I think with the internet now and more people open to schools like Scott's, I think it's a much better, less intimidating, less punishing world for especially musicians. I mean, musicians can be such soft-hearted, sensitive people, and even though I am an artist in a sense like that. I mean, I think I just grew up and I was just relentless and tougher than a lot of musicians or whatever. But I think I just got lucky that I just kept fighting away, So maybe this is a way that they don't have to fight so hard and be defeated.
And it's right here in Oklahoma.
It is. It's just.
I think it's fabulous. You don't have to go to Chicago, New York, or L.A. It's right here.
Even though those cities are great too. Those cities are great, but it is. It's right here, so you can. You can go to the school here, figure out how to play, and then you can go to New York and play a show.
Well, you and I had a son about the same time.
Oh, I see.
And and my son passed away, but Scott sent
Oh, I
a
see.
large donation in memory of my son for the Rose Home, a room there that's named for him. And I just wanted to give him a shout out for that. That was so compassionate to be as busy as you're describing him to be, and he was still so thoughtful to honor my son. So
that's a powerful thing to say. Thank you. Yeah.
So this is for the Oklahoma History Center. How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, I don't really think of it like that, you know. I mean, I think the people in my family and the people that love me, and even someone like you, you know, I think we always think about each other, you know, and we would need, I don't know, you know, I don't need any plaque. I don't need any statue in the park. I don't need, you know, it's like, you know, when you do music, you know, it's like I feel like you and I know each other because of the music, and then because of other circumstances we know each other, you know, in a deeper way, in a real way. But you know, that's enough for me. You know, I really am very glad to be just a normal person in the normal world, you know, experiencing all these things and being kind of a witness to how amazing the world is. But the world is also full of pain, you know, like you're talking about. There is horrible pain and suffering, and we try to remember that life is still the most beautiful thing ever, you know. And I don't think of even that I'm the messenger, you know. I just think the music has made me. I mean, Oklahoma has made me. I mean, everywhere I've gone in the world, it's with those two things that people know about us, our music and that we're from Oklahoma. I mean, I make a joke about it, but it's a little bit like being Santa Claus from the North Pole, you know. And Oklahoma's done so much for me and didn't even know that they were doing it, you know, and celebrating our music, which is, I mean, we're such a weirdo, unique group. But I think, again, you know, it reaches people's hearts. So that's my promise, you know. It's like I'm only here because of the music, you know. I never stand in front of the music. I never, you know, it's not about me. It's about the music, and I'll gladly stand behind it and say, yeah, we're here, you know. So for me, yeah, it's to remember me. Wouldn't it matter even as much as like that to people to know that music, and that's, to me, that's really all that matters, you know. And being here with you, I mean, I love talking and doing stuff like this, but as long as you know, my friends and family are taken care of, I'm like, yeah. I mean, I never think about it like that, you know.
Well, you've had a tremendous legacy. We're glad to be able to record it here with the Oklahoma History Center and with
it's wonderful. It is. I'm so glad to be part of this museum.
I appreciate you being a part of our Oklahoma music.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.